Hey, welcome to another show of RPMHD. I'm here. This is Mike D. I'm here with Dave W. And we're here to talk about the PlayNHRA Virginia Nationals. Dave, we're going to get right to it. A very unique weekend.
Yeah, it sure was. All the way from not being at the track for the last couple of years to a first NHRA planned 3 qualifying session Saturday, and almost the tale of 2 races after that rainstorm came through on Sunday. The semifinals and finals were run in much different track conditions and much different performance levels too.
No, they certainly were. And with the weather we saw throughout the weekend, I don't think anyone saw a rainstorm coming through or a weather delay, as we say, where a track cleanup where that would have to take place. And then all of a sudden, mainly the fuel teams had to make the major adjustments. It seemed like the pro stock teams pretty much held steady even after the weather delay.
Yeah, I don't think that the rain it improved the track conditions, and it probably helped out the nitro teams who could bring their own power. But I mean, it was still muggy and humid as can be, so the naturally aspirated guys didn't really pick up too much. As it got later in the evening and they ran the Pro Mod final, the Pro Mod cars picked up too. But yeah, the Pro Stock and the motorcycles were pretty much got what they got.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, the air didn't change much, just the track cooled down some.
Correct.
Which is where I believe we seen Top Fuel might have in the final round pick up maybe 2 tenths or something to that degree, some of that nature. But hey, once again, it was a very unique weekend. We're going to touch on everything that took place. And I guess we can start where we always start. Top Fuel, Doug Coletta wins again this year.
It's amazing the run that team is on. Just in general, Coletta Motorsports, an all Coletta team final. So Sean Langdon, number 1 qualifier, runner-up. Doug Coletta wins the race. They're number 1 and 2 in points. I mean, nobody stepped up to stop them yet. It's a pretty impressive run for that team.
No, it is. And then, I heard him say that it was the first time the number 2 qualifier had won in Top Fuel since Houston. And Houston isn't even on a tour anymore. That's crazy. I mean, you figure you qualify number 2, you figure somebody qualify number 2, you probably get 1 or 2 wins a year. And it's the first time someone from the number 2 spot had won in Top Fuel since Houston. That's it's pretty different. I mean, who would expect that? Go ahead.
I mean, I agree. If you look at just the qualifying positions that are winners just this year alone, it's pretty much been like 1-5, 3-6, and then we had just that random one last weekend or 2 weeks ago, last event at Bristol when Tony Schumacher out of the bottom half in 12th took it. But yeah, it's very unusual to see where they're laid out in qualifying, and it also goes to show that sometimes qualifying doesn't really mean much when it comes to that. And I guess number 2, you'd expect it more for number 1. If you would have said number 1 qualifier hasn't won since Houston in a couple of years and a track that's no longer on a schedule, I'd be more surprised. But number 2, I guess you don't really see that often. So
yeah, and with the parity in Top Fuel that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years, I guess it could be shocking and not shocking. Coming from that part of the field. But still on the day, it was still a great event. I mean, like I said, we've seen Doug Coletta come from the number 2 spot. Round 1, I believe he had Cameron Ferrer, who didn't make the call, unfortunate but true. It's always good to see a team out there that doesn't have the budget of some of the big teams, but obviously they fell on hard times or whatever the case may have been to where they weren't able to make the call. Yep. Round 2, he runs Josh Hart, goes 396. Hart smokes the tires at 449. And in the semifinals, he had Tony Stewart. And talking about Tony Stewart and his weekend, one of the better weekends for Tony Stewart this past weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they had a solid qualifying performance, and he really, to me, made the run of the day in first round, being low ET, putting down that 387. It was like, okay, they got a race day setup, and Tony's just a win, looking for a place to happen. And I was very, very surprised after the delay after the rain and after the first pair of top fuel cars went down and went at 81 and 82 next to each other, that team smoked the tires. That was a shocker to me. I did not expect that out of that team.
No, neither did I. And that just lets me know that I guess they were probably going for it. I'm guessing they would have to have been going for a high 70, 78, 79 maybe. And I mean, considering who they were racing, I get it. I mean, you know, that team's not going to lay up. So why should you? So, I mean, with Alan Johnson's tuning, you can't lay up. So, I mean, you figure once the track temperature changed and the rains had passed and they prep the track and everything, and you're dealing with Alan Johnson, I mean, you almost know you have to put something on the board. And I believe the two cars you just said went in front of him with 81 and 82. So, correct. You know, Alan's looking at that, and he's right next to you, and that's who you pair it against. You figure, okay, Alan's going to at least probably go 80 flat or 78, 79. So I understand it, even though it could be shocking. I can see where it can happen.
Yeah, I mean, and they go out there, and Alan goes out and tunes Coletta to I think he went at 82 as well. So
yeah, 382,
they 81 and 82. They interviewed them both, and they were kind of like, yeah, we kind of talked set up notes, and we kind of had them set up pretty similar, but no sharing information for the finals. It's every man for himself there. We saw how that played out and it just makes you wonder, did they just step over the line, or was there something in the lane? But, I mean, at the end of the day, if you look at the funny car final that went right before them, the tire smoke was in opposite lanes, so I don't think you can blame the racetrack for what happened. I think that, you know, the smoke that you had in the left lane in the funny car final and the smoke that you had in the right lane in the semis and the final and top fuel was just simply somebody stepping over the edge. They were looking for the edge, and they found it.
No, you're right, and they went for it. I mean, we know, and we'll talk about the funny car final in a second, but that Tasca team, you know, when conditions get more cooler or a track gets cooler and favorable, they're known to step on it. Can't say I was surprised they smoked the tires, but once again, look who they're racing on the other lane. I mean, you got Jimmy Proctor. They weren't going to lay up either. So totally understand it. If they did, but them being that they did smoke the tires, it makes sense. Credit to Steve Torrance. 500 round victories, I believe.
Yeah,
was what they mentioned. 500 round wins, quite an achievement. Believe his first round win was Richmond 2006.
That was his first event. His first round win didn't come till Las Vegas. His first event that he entered in top fuel was Richmond. Now, when they talk about these stats, it's hard for me to specifically. They don't really differentiate because they say, oh, it's his 500th career round win, but then they're talking about his top fuel career, but they don't add in all the round wins that he had when he was the top alcohol dragster champion. So it's like, okay, but then when you talk about the overall wins, you add in his wins to his top fuel wins, and you say, okay, he's got X amount of career wins. So it's like, if you're going to be consistent across the board, then just say he has this many round wins in NHRA and he has this many event wins in NHRA, or be specific and say he has 500 top fuel round wins. You know, don't say it's his career round win, because it's not, because he's got more career round wins than that.
Understandable. And maybe we'll talk to the powers that be and actually be a little more
specific.
Spot on. Specific.
Yeah, that's all.
Clarify things a little better.
Right.
Also in top fuel in the weekend, Dan Mercier, even though he didn't win, I mean, he gave Josh Hart all he can handle, and as unfortunate, a whole shot loss, had a hole out the whole run, but that team is nothing to snooze at all.
And honestly, after their Joliet performance and them coming here and another hot weather race, when it came time to pick in the bracket bonanza for Drag Race Bracket Bonanza, I did not. I lost. That broke my bracket because I did not have Josh Hart putting him on the trailer in round one. I had Dan Mercier going rounds.
And really, even when I said with a hole out, he still outperformed Hart. He just was late. I mean, right. that light, believe it was 97 on the tree. That's not going to win you many races in top fuel. Maybe 7-8 years ago would have, but not nowadays.
Yeah, and I mean they were with the hole out, but that's probably what helped them get down the track. You know, 308 to 317 is a 10-mile-an-hour difference, but only 1,000th in ET. if he didn't have a hole out, maybe he would have went up in smoke. Maybe he would have went a 96 or 95. It's hard to say. But yes, I agree. Josh Hart was always one of those players that was kind of like Justin Ashley. If you remember in Josh's rookie season, when he'd come up against Brittany Force, it was almost always a whole shot victory for Josh. I mean, that particular team, I wouldn't say that they're up against the wall. They got their backs to the wall, but a lot of times the driver in that situation can really step up when he needs to and cut a light.
Yeah. And Josh, I mean, he understands the time we're in the top field racing right now, and that's definitely what he's all about. I mean, he's going to cut a light. He understands also that his car is not necessarily performing like it did in the past and where it wants to be right now. So he knows that he has to be razor sharp on a tree, and he's done that. I mean, sometimes he wins, sometimes he loses. Right, round one, he got the win. But speaking of Brittany Force, Zole didn't win the event, and granted, she has some other things on her mind later on in the day. You'd have to say that team has had a bit of a turnaround, or at least showing some promise.
I mean, I would say so based on their qualifying performance, based on picking up the win in the Mission Foods Challenge on Saturday. That had to be a huge morale booster for the team, even though it's not on the, yes, it's not Sunday elimination wins and race wins for a Wally, but it still counts towards the countdown. And it's still, anytime you turn it on a win light in a race car, it boosts the team spirit and the team morale. Had a good run really against Tony Stewart in the second round. And just, I mean, they were pretty much dead even on the reaction timer. And just Tony outperformed him. It's a shame, Brittany, you could look at it any which way. You could say, okay, well, if Brittany would have had a 50 light, she could have still won the race on a hole shot. And maybe if the car performed just a little bit better, it could have went either way. Or just what happened to Tony in the semifinals, they just overstepped the line in the Mopar car, and it could have very easily went Brittany's day.
Oh, it definitely could have. And I mean, Brittany having a 50 light, that just doesn't happen too often. Unfortunate, but true. She was 86, I believe, on the tree on that run or something of that nature. And that's kind of par for the course with her. She was 86. Tony was 87. But for the fact that the car went down the track, didn't smoke the tires, which has kind of been the culprit of that car, and just it's either go or blow. I believe David Grubnick has seemed to have found that medium spot to where it's not necessarily running low ET. They only qualified 11th. But on a hot racetrack, which is not really a David Grubnick type deal, for him to massage that car and get it to go down the track, win the Missions 2 Food Tasty Challenge, make it a couple rounds in Richmond, I think there's some hope there that they can get that car turned around at least by the countdown.
Well, and their biggest hurdle that they're trying to overcome, I think, that really has bit them, even when they were laying down big numbers in qualifying and the big speeds, was always consistency. You could go up there and run 3 big numbers and then just blow the tires off at 300 foot the next time. So if they could just get it down the track consistently, build a database, put some runs together back to back to back, even though that one, they didn't turn on the win light, it still made it down the track, 393, 317. They got tuning data. We're going to Norwalk. It's going to be hot at Norwalk. So the same tune-ups rules should apply there. And hopefully they got a baseline to build off of and, see what happens. 4 qualifying shots here this weekend to keep working on it and see what happens on race day in Norwalk. Yeah,
no, you're absolutely right. And we'll see. We'll see if they can continue the momentum. Another guy I want to talk about, Tony Schumacher. He qualified 13th, and he's kind of been on a roll lately, 2 final round appearances, moving up in the points. And then he has Sean Reed, who in qualifying had a really good weekend, actually had the number 1 spot there for about a pair. And he gets by again. I mean, and I'm thinking, I'm watching this after round 1. I'm going, wow, Tony Schumacher has got some 4-leaf clovers or something going. I mean, the car, it's not putting up great numbers, but I mean, he's getting all the breaks right now. He gets out of round 1. Didn't fare much better in round 2, and he got beat by Antron Brown. But just looking at Tony Schumacher and how he hasn't had the round one losses that he was accumulating earlier, and he's just kind of I want to say he's getting by with the skin of his teeth because he's not blowing anyone away by any means. He's just kind of, I don't know what to call it. I guess when everyone's chips are down, he's just kind of skating there under the radar. I mean, granted, he was gone around round two, but just the fact that he was able to go another round the way he did it, I should say. I mean, it wasn't nothing spectacular. The higher qualified car had problems, and he just kind of motored down through there and got another round win. And it's kind of weird. It's kind of I won't say weird. I would just say luck is on his side right now.
You know what? I'd rather be lucky than good, though, sometimes, because you can't win them all on being good. You need something to go your way sooner or later, and Lord knows they've had enough struggles the last couple of years, and some of the early round losses and some of the worst seasons of his career have happened recently. So it's nice to see that team start to turn it around.
And another guy we can touch on is Antron Brown. After Q1, it looked like he was number one qualifier. He ended up qualifying fifth, but he had a very consistent car all weekend. And for a while there, it looked like it might be his day until the weather changed. And even then, he ran a 382 to Sean Langdon's 381. I mean, that's nothing to hang your head about. I mean, he was right there, considering I believe they were the first cars down the track on a newly paved track that had just got rained on, and they had to dry and re-prep and everything else. I won't say newly paved, but freshly prepped track after the rainfall. Yeah, I mean, a very good weekend for AB, who hadn't been out of the first round, I think, since his win in Chicago. So, I mean, for him to make it to the semifinals and very well had the car capable of going to the finals. But once again, 088 on the tree is not going to get you anywhere nowadays in top field racing. And Sean Langdon got him with a 58 light, 381 to a 382.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it was just a rare, unusually bad light for Antron, because he's usually not that slow on the tree. He's usually 50s or 60s all day long. And his first two rounds were both 64s. And again, a 64 wouldn't have won that race either, but it would have made it a whole heck of a lot closer. Yeah,
it wouldn't have won it, but he would have been right there. And last but not least, I guess we could touch on Sean Langdon. I mean, he made it to the final round. The Kalita team they were kind of looking like the JFR cars there with Proc and Force. Langdon and Kalita seem to just be kind of having their way with the field right now. I mean, Langdon was the number one qualifier. He had a bye in the first round, and Steve Torrance, which is no easy matchup. I mean, 397 to a 397. Langdon wins on a hole shot with a 78 light on a hole shot. I mean, Torrance was just sleep there, Steve there. And then we just spoke about how he beat Antron the 81 to 82 before losing to his teammate in the finals. But that Kalita dragster team with Alan Johnson and Brian Houston, man, I mean, it seems to be a 1-2 punch. And I don't know if there's any stopping them anytime soon.
No, it really is. And I mean, 1-2 punch, they're 1-2 into points. Sean has worked his way up. Doug is obviously the leader now by 67 after the event. But they are Justin Ashley with his first round exit is now 108 back in third. Steve Torrance all the way 176 back in fourth, and Antron 209 back in fifth. So I mean, they're really, those two cars are starting to separate themselves from the pack. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out and how the countdown gets set up. It's a shame to know that the points get reset and some of those big, large leads are going to be erased as we go through this, but it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the summer plays out.
Yeah, and with those big, large leads being erased, it makes me wonder, Justin Ashley, the team that was so consistent last year until the countdown started, but even then, when Pomona had an outside shot, has not been the Justin Ashley, Mike Green combination we've seen over the past year or so. And I don't know last year it didn't matter whether the track was cool, hot, whatever it was. I mean, they pretty much get down and make people pay, and it's just not happening for them this year.
Nope. They were a consistent minimum semifinal round player, and that always put him in the Mission Foods Challenge, and it was pretty much the Justin Ashley benefit race, because if he was in the challenge, it seemed like he won it on Saturday. And and started the season the same way this year. And then kind of tapered off a little bit. Makes me wonder if they're working on something else. They're testing something, or just a string of bad luck.
Yeah, I would want to say that you want to say they were testing and kind of give them an out. I really don't know. And it could just be bad luck. I mean, these cars are finicky, and when things change, it takes a while sometimes to grasp and get your momentum back. I mean, Neil Strasberg was with Leah Pruitt driving last year, or Leah Stewart, and the car ran great, put Tony in the car, and they've stumbled quite a bit. I mean, they had a good weekend this past weekend in Richmond, but I would think they'd let you know the first few races of this year have not gone the way they planned. And, it's just how the mob flops sometimes, and in this sport, you can be great one year and the next year, you don't know what happened.
Well, I mean, Brittany Force is a case in point on that. I mean, look at off of her championship run, all those low ETs and top speeds going on, and now they're struggling just to go rounds.
Yeah. So once again, all credit to Doug Coletta. I mean, that team seems to be running on all cylinders right now and doing everything that they have to do to defend this championship. I mean, they're letting you know they're here to play, and hey, we'll see. Norwalk's next weekend, and anything can happen. But they seem to have it figured out on hot weather, cold weather. That Coletta team seems to have it figured out right now, and credit to those guys. Somebody's going to have to stop them, or they're going to run away with this thing now and in the countdown. We've seen Alan Johnson do it before.
Right. Yep.
Well, moving on to funny car, your winner, Austin Prock. Believe it was his third win this season.
Mm-hmm.
And qualified number 3, which was, we're used to seeing him qualify number 1 or number 2. It's like, well, what are you doing at number 3? But hey, doesn't matter. As long as you're in the show, it's all that matters. And he beats Cruz Petroground round 1 with a 404 to Cruz's 423. He then runs a 403 to beat Ron Capps' 412. Great showing this weekend anyway by Capps. We'll talk about him in a moment. Matt Hagan, after the track cools down, they have to re-prep the surface and everything. 396 to Matt Hagan's 403. Gets to the final. He goes 392, low ET of the weekend, 327. Defeats Bob Tasker, who ran a smoke the tires and went 714.
That could be definitely a case of the track coming to them. But in all honesty, they weren't running the best low ETs on Saturday, but still ended up with a JFR Mission Foods double up with, Brittany winning top fuel. He ended up still winning the Mission Foods Challenge. He comes in there third, but again, it's almost kind of like we talked about. It's almost a tale of 2 or 3 different events. Saturday was almost like an event in its own. The first 2 rounds on Sunday and the second 2 rounds. And the track seemingly came to their setup. Not to say Tasca didn't have the track come to them, because, I think Tasca stunned everybody, including myself, when they came out with that 330-mile-an-hour blast in the semifinals, when hardly nobody was getting down to go 320, and he comes out and blows out a 330. You knew it was going to be a whole different ballgame at that point. But that also plays into the Proc team's hands there, the Proc Rocket and that 396 and then the 392 throwdown in the final.
No, you're right. It does. I mean, it kind of fell right into their tuning window, so to speak, and it certainly just worked out for them. In watching this event, before the rain came, I was almost at the point of saying this may be the first event in a very, very long time where we didn't get a 3-second funny car run, if you take Denver out of the mix, whatever the case may be. And that's where it looked like it was headed until the rainfall. I mean, there was not a single 3-second run until then. Well,
in the last event that we had that did not have a 3-second funny car run at all for the entire event was Denver 2015. So it's been a while.
And that's why I say, if we take Denver out of the equation,
right. You'd go back to Epping 2015, so it's not that much further. It was 2015 no matter what, but Denver 2015 was the last non-3-second funny car run. The biggest surprise for me after seeing qualifying was starting to research on the top fuel side, not so much the funny car side. When's the last time we had an event that didn't even have a 320-mile-an-hour run in top fuel? But that went by the wayside. Brittany Force with her 321 in first round took that, and then Coletta with his 333 top speed in the final. That all went by the wayside too. But it was looking like for a while it could have been one of the trickier and slower events when it came to ET and speed in both nitro categories in a long time.
The slow Virginia Nationals.
Yes.
Another guy, and I can't really say it's a surprise. He had a great weekend, and they seem to just have a handle on this race car for the most part. Qualified number 4, Blake Alexander.
Yes.
Round 1, 410 beats Buddy Hall's 462. Round 2 essentially got a bye when John Force was not there. We'll speak on that in a moment. And loses to Bob Tasca, but I mean, nothing to hang their head about. Kind of like Antron Brown, 399 to 398 for Tasca.
Yeah, it wasn't like they didn't show up and they didn't come up there unprepared and they had the 4.0 or the 410 tune-up in the car. They stepped it up and they ran into threes when they needed to as well. They were, again, unfortunately, on the losing side of a close drag race. Tasca with an 048 light, Blake with an 075. They were only 1/100 apart in ET, but 300ths apart on the starting line will get you every time.
No, yeah, well, and another guy I want to talk about, Ron Capps. Didn't have the quickest car, but showed a lot of consistency. That car hadn't been getting down the track of recent events, and it looks like they finally have found a tuning window that works that can at least make the car competitive. I mean, they only qualified 11th. Was scheduled to run Alexis DeJoria first round. After Alexis did her burnout, I'm not sure what happened. The car wouldn't back up. They pushed it back to the starting line, which we've seen done a lot in the sport, and they shut it off. Don't know why, but it was a break for Capps. Granted, he did go 409.
Something broke and it wouldn't. They pushed it back, but it wouldn't. I think it was neutral at that point. It wouldn't go back into forward either. So they were.
They were in the water then, yeah. And then
that was it. It was done.
And then on the hot racetrack, Ron Capps runs a 412, which in most races you wouldn't think much of, but on this particular track in round 2 is actually a pretty decent elapsed time. Unfortunately, you were going against Austin Prock and Jimmy Prock, and they go 403. And thanks for coming. Napa necessarily didn't know how at that moment, but
no,
but they did show some, much like the Brittany Force team, they've showed some life, some signs of life that they're turning the corner, and maybe this is a sign of things to come. We're so used to seeing that team as part of the Big Four, and they've kind of gotten replaced by Tasca in that realm of things. You know, it's kind of like, well, it was really the Big Three at first, and Tasca made it the Big Four. Now you know Capps is kind of falling out of that, and it's kind of like back to the Big Three with Proc, Hagen, and Tasca now. But hopefully, come countdown, I mean, that's a team that we can count on. Making the story interesting. Go ahead.
I mean, they're way down. I mean, they're 7th in points, 355 out. They're 5 behind Daniel Wilkerson for 6th after this event. And like you said, we're going to touch on John. Unfortunately, with his second round loss, because of not being able to get out there and compete, Proc and his win. Proc's got aside from Gage Herrera, who just dominates and wins everything right now. Proc has the second biggest lead out of all the professional classes with 131 over John, 166 over Hagen, and 197 over J.R. Todd, 209 over Tasca. I mean, he's got pretty much a full race lead over second place and almost a 2-race lead over the rest of the guys. So he's starting to stretch it out. Everybody in funny cars going, man, we're glad we got a countdown because Austin's kind of running away with this deal.
Yeah, I don't see anyone stopping him anytime soon either. I mean, it's not if they can make it down the hot weather tracks like they've done this past weekend and last weekend. I mean, if they can run this well in the heat, there's no stopping them. I mean, I've had to think that the Tasca team's got to be hoping for the cooler months. They can't wait for October to show up for things to cool down a little bit so they can put their tune-up back in it that likes to run 330 all the time. But
correct.
Through July and August, I've said it last time we had the show. Once the track temperature goes up, Tasca goes out, and that's just kind of how that team is. Until they prove otherwise to me, that's where I'm going to stick with it. This weekend, after round 2, the rains and whatnot, kind of like you said, the tuning came into their window as far as the conditions fell right into their lap. So, I mean, granted, they ran well, smoked the tires in the final. Not going to take anything away from them. They had a great weekend. It's always good to make it to the final round, even if you don't win. Good points day for that team.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, Proc has pretty much got the car to beat. You know, no one else really has done much in funny car. I mean, Todd Hagen round 1, you wouldn't really expect to see that as a 7-10 matchup. Hey, Todd's won some races this year. Hagen's been struggling lately, and they both struggled in that run, a 439 to a 433. But Hagen taking the win. I don't look at that as, I mean, you can look at it as a bad weekend for Todd, but that's a car that can very well go straight to the final round next weekend in Norwalk. So I'm not going to hold that against him.
No, you can't. And it's been a resurgent for that team as well this year as part of the Coletta comeback, if you will. You know, obviously Doug won a championship last year, yes, but for as consistent they've been to end last season and to start this season, especially compared to the way JR started his year last year after that incident with John, and they were the ones that were mired back in points. So the fact that he's going rounds, going to finals, you know, just like you said, it's too much of a yo-yo effect. Final round, early exit, and then could go back to the final again at Norwalk. They just got to get that consistency down.
Yeah, and a team that's looking for any type of consistency right now is Cruz Petragon. I mean, granted, you had Austin Proc round 1, but Cruz had no business qualifying 14th, so to speak, to even begin with. And with that team where it's at, I mean, they're not a low-budget team. They're not a team that's running low on parts and have to sit out around a qualifying. I am shocked, and I don't know why I keep being shocked, but for the last 2 years, I've been shocked that Cruz is struggling the way he is, and I don't know why. I mean, they just cannot get anything. It'll make a low 4.0 run or a good 390 run, and it'll put a hole out or smoke the tires. I don't know. I mean, it's
right.
It's troubling to see a team, especially with being a driver like Cruz. You're a 2-time champion. You're definitely headed to Drag Racing Hall of Fame and whatever other prestige moments there could be in your career, and to be running like this, I'm sure Cruz cannot be happy. I mean, he literally switched teams at the end of last year, and it's almost like it's the same car.
It's very curious. I have no idea where their struggles are coming from. They have had few flashes of brilliance. They've put together a couple of runs here and there in the low 90s to qualify better than they normally do, I guess you would say, but they're just like few and far between. I don't know where the problem is. Is it something, what are they fighting? What are they working on that they are just struggling so hard? And we talked about with anybody, it's very easy to lose the handle. These cars are not the easiest thing to get down to racetrack at all, or everybody would do it. But it's just curious to me what they got going on. And when does it end? When do they have their resurgence?
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to lose the handle. It's another thing to never have the handle. And I can't even see when the team last had the handle. I mean, Cruz's team is
It's been a while.
I mean, it's been since Pomona, the finals of 2022, I believe.
Yeah, over a year.
Yeah,
and they were so hopeful because they brought in, I think that was the race that Lee Beard came and gave them a little consultation, right? And they were so high on it. They were running so good, low 80s. And they're like, man, just wait till next year. And next year just didn't come.
Yeah. Well, it came. They just didn't.
Yeah, well,
next year came. They didn't.
We're still waiting on next year, unfortunately, for that team. And it's just a shame because, you get little flashes of brilliance here and there, but I mean, they're almost out there persevering and making laps and making runs in the same way that you would consider a Buddy Hull or a Terry Haddock or, not to take anything away from those guys, but they're teams that they're out there to be out there. You don't want to say field fillers because anybody can win on any given day because these things are so unpredictable. But as of yet, those guys are kind of in that category because they're not going rounds and they're at the bottom of the point standings.
Well, heck, if you were to ask Terry Haddock right now, Terry Haddock would probably say he's enjoying funny car racing this year more than Cruz is. I mean,
yeah, because they're seeing an improvement. They're seeing 3-second runs. They're seeing passes where Cruz goes out there, makes a 3-second run or a 390, and they're just like, we should have been a low 390, not a high 390. We're not. Yeah. We're at the bottom of the spectrum. But like you said, 2-time champion. He's been out there for as long as he has. That you expect better of that team than what they do. You expect more.
You do. And last but definitely not least, John Force. He was in the final Saturday of the Mission 2 Foods Tasty Challenge, losing to Austin Prock, but that isn't necessarily the story. For those who haven't seen it or have seen it, or I'm sure it's floating all over the internet, involved in a high-speed crash towards the top end yesterday. I believe he was racing Terry Haddock.
Correct, he was.
When the car blew up. I don't like to use the word blew up, but the engine exploded, which we've seen with funny cars dozens, hundreds of times. John's had a few explosions himself. The car then crossed the track, went into the left-hand side guardrail, then came back across the track into the right-hand side. The safety safari was right there, as they always are. They helped get John out of the car. He was then transported to or medevac to a local hospital where he was they say he was alert, stable. He was communicating with NHRA officials and believed to be in stable condition. With an incident like that, and for a driver who has nothing left to prove in this sport, where do you think John goes from here?
It's really hard to say or even speculate until we hear in general what the extent of his condition is, what the evaluation is. I mean, you still, that was a tough wreck. That was a tough impact, a tough explosion for anybody to endure. But I mean, he's still a 75-year-old man strapped in that race car. And you don't recover as quick. I mean, look at how banged up and beat up and he was in 2007 at Dallas. And, he was in his 50s when that happened and came back. And I think that if there was anything that this wreck would prove would be, let's wait and see what happens. Let's see what they say the extent of it is. And as much as a sentimental favorite as it would be for John to get out there and kind of just finish out the season, he almost prophetically called his shot after the Epping final, saying this kid's going to replace me and my time's coming. And then this happens. And it just makes you wonder, in a classic Old Force interview, I opened my mouth when I shouldn't have. And, I said that and God's like, all right, let's take that to heart. You sure you meant that? Because we'll get you out of this car if that's what you mean. And he has nothing left to prove. The sentimental favorite to have one last championship run. He's running so good this year. It's his best start to the season in a decade. He's number 2 in points. It was basically going toe to toe with Proc. He's the only car that can really match him. And to have this happen and be out, it would be hard pressed for me to think that he'd get in the car in Norwalk in 5 days after going through this and get right back in and do it. Whereas you could skip Norwalk and you get a month off till Seattle and, try going again. I think it's one of those things where I know he said he's got a contract through Peak. He's going through the end of this year. And I think the end of next year, he signed a 3-year deal with them, but it might be one of those things where you look at the end of the year or you look at, is it even worth getting back in?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's really tough to assess at the moment because until we hear further reports of what could, if there are serious injuries or not, like you said, be pretty far-fetched to just say, hey, he'll be at Norwalk. Then again, it might not be. It's John Force. We just never know. But like you said, you skip Norwalk, you're still right there in the points. He could very well come out of Norwalk in the top 3 in the points and still be right there. I mean, even if he was to take off and just kind of get everything sorted out, and they say Sonoma, which is essentially 5-6 weeks away. California track. His home is in California. It's kind of low. It's not necessarily local, but wouldn't be as far of a travel for him, and kind of get back in the driver's seat. Then we just don't know, though. We don't know. We're still waiting to hear word on his official condition, or has he's been released from the hospital, or what exactly is going on. A lot of people look at that wreck and they say, you got nothing left to prove, which he doesn't. He has nothing left to prove, and it was as terrifying, as frightening as it was. It was good to see him actually talking to NHRA officials as they were loading him in the back of the ambulance and whatnot. He seemed to be conscious and alert, and those are all good signs. Will this be the end? We don't know. It's too early to say. According to his daughter, he'll be back. Austin Prock says he'll be back. And if you ever listen to John Force, he always says he'll be back. So
that's right.
I would, based off me seeing him speaking to officials and as he was getting loaded into the ambulance and everything, I would have to think that he would be back. When? Don't know. But once again, thoughts and prayers are out to Force and his family.
Definitely. Respect their privacy. They will make an announcement when they're ready. Don't need to speculate on anything or put stuff out there. Let them do what they need to do, and when it's time for the public to know, we'll know.
Yeah, most definitely, and I'm sure that will come when they're ready for that. So
correct.
With that being said, we will transition on to the normally aspirated machines. That will be Pro Stock Motorcycle. We'll start off with Pro Stock. Your winner. I don't know who had him in their Bonanza bracket, because the guy is good for about 2 or 3 wins a year. You just don't know where they're going to come from or when they're going to happen. But Aaron Stanfield wins Pro Stock. And like I say, he's a great driver. We all know he drives for Elite, which is a great team. He's always good for 2-3 wins a year. You just don't know when they're going to happen. And, well, in Richmond, it happened.
Well, and he was definitely earned them, because as you go through and you look through the eliminations ladder that he had, the opponents that he had, and the lights that he cut as the day progressed. I mean, 003 in the semis took care of Greg on identical ETs. And, Greg had the better car, but they stepped up. They ran identical to Greg. And then they go to the final round, and they actually outperformed Dallas Glenn. Not only leave on him with a 007 light to Dallas's 016, but then they go out there and run a 61, and they match Dallas's 61. But it was even quicker by 3,000. So you get them a little on one end, and you get them a little bit more on the other. I would say Aaron earned that win just as much, because if you take those lights that he had and you switch them to anything else, if you give him an 020 light in any of those runs, he don't win that drag race. So Aaron stepped up. The car was there and allowed him to have it backed him up. But that was Aaron's driving that won that race.
It most definitely was. Credit to him for winning the race. I mean, he qualified 5th. He beat Val Smealand in the first round, who woke up in the first round, because I don't think Val Smealand had barely made it down the racetrack before then. And credit to Smealand, goes 671, Aaron Stansfield 667. Then you get Troy Coughlin, who was not having the greatest weekend, only qualified 13th, and he beats Troy Coughlin with a 668 to Troy's 670. And like you spoke on, he matched Greg and ET, but was 003 on the tree with the 662, and then went 007 against Dallas Glenn, and they both ran 661. So
yeah.
No, it was part car, part driver. First 2 rounds was the car, second 2 rounds was the driver. That's what it takes.
Oh, it does. Like I say, 100%. You take those lights out of the equation, you give him a 20 light or worse, he's done against Greg and he's done against Dallas. Neither one of those would have won that race. So he stepped up when he needed to.
And how about Dallas? I believe he was in a brand new car this weekend and took it straight to the final round.
He did. And, and he's one of those drivers who you're kind of like, he's there in the conversation every week. I mean, he's leading the points. He's 40 up on Greg, 65 up on Erica now, and then 192 up and 193 up on Jeg and Aaron back and forth and fifth. So you got over a full race lead on fourth and fifth. You've kind of had like the big three in pro stock throughout the season, and nobody really expected Dallas to be in the mix. Greg and Erica, yes. The biggest thing for me, though, isn't necessarily Dallas's performance and the fact that he's up there. It's the fact that there's between him and Greg, those are the only two KB cars that seem to be really doing much of anything against Elite this year.
Yeah, Derek Kramer hasn't shown up to the party yet, even though he beat Chris McGay in the first round with a 666, and then Kramer lost to Dallas Glenn when he spun the tires right off the line with a 17-second elapsed time. Kramer and Matt Hartford just I don't know. And Eric Latino, he's there, but his clutch foot isn't.
Right.
I mean, he beat Brandon Miller in round one, but he was 092 on the tree. And then he was 186 on the tree against Bo Butner, and they both ran 671. I mean, if you're Eric Latino, man, you just gotta try.
Well, no, that one was unusual, and they were both off. I don't know why they both went a 671 there. I mean, they were 500s off the rest of the field in that particular round. But, I mean, how about Bo Butner coming back and going all the way to the semis in his return debut at a 500 I did not have Bo Butner in the semis on my bracket bonanza, that's for sure. When I was looking those brackets over, I'm like, nah, he's out round one.
Yeah, I mean, him and Jerry Tucker both ran 672, and Bo wins on a whole shot. He beats Eric Latino with a 59 light, but Latino was 186 on the tree. And then Dallas Glenn took care of him with a 63 to Bo Butner 65. But no, Bo definitely, and using the Quadras car, made the most of it. Definitely made the most of the weekend. Nothing you hang your head about there.
No.
I mean, he hasn't lost it, that's for sure. And I guess I don't know if this will be the last time. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if we'll see Bo again later on this year.
Yeah, it would be very interesting. And obviously he just stepped into the ride because Mountain Motor Pro Stock happened to be running there, and the Quadras obviously have more pressing things going on. So I don't know if that is a sign of things to come. And Elite's going to be pretty much starting to get spread thin after they start the Western swing or two races or however you want to call it in Seattle with the announcement on Saturday that they've added Sienna Wild Gust to the team now too. So that's one more out of the Elite stable or out of the KB stable and into the Elite stable. But, man, they're spreading themselves really thin over there with cars and drivers, I feel like.
Yeah, and speaking of the Sienna Wild Gust situation, from what article I read is that it came as a shock to KB.
Oh, really?
Yeah, unexpected. Had heard nothing about it and totally blindsided by it. Just completely shocked of that transpiring between her leaving KB and going to Elite. I don't know what happened.
In all honesty, that's why I say other than Dallas and Greg, it seems like most of the KB team cars have been struggling, and that is another perfect example with, Sienna struggling to even make the show. And if she did, first round loss, they lost Camry being out there. You would have thought, okay, Camry was in a test car. Camry and Sienna were supposed to be, the female powerhouse of the team. Camry gets injured. She's out. Brandon Foster hasn't, he's shown flashes of brilliance, but hasn't really done much. Sienna hasn't done much. Kramer and Hartford have been hit or miss this year, mostly miss. It kind of makes you wonder what the heck's going on over on the KB side of things. And maybe they looked at it as an opportunity that, even if I get the sixth best motor out of the Elite stables, it's still going to be better than what KB's giving us now.
Yeah, and when you look at it, it's really been Greg, Dallas, and if Eric Latino left on time, it would be Eric, because his car has actually been pretty good most of this year. It's just been the driver, and I'm pretty sure he'll be the first one to tell you that. It's really been those three cars from as far as performance standpoint with KB cars. The next driver that's been somewhat consistent and going rounds is Brandon Foster, and he don't even run the whole tour. I mean, it's kind of baffling. I know they're not short on horsepower. I don't know what it is. And for her, like we said, to make that switch over, it's just from reports I read, it was that completely blindsided Greg Anderson. He was shocked, and I mean, obviously elite. I'm pretty sure they got a lot of horses, a lot of bullets, and the Western swing isn't quite what it used to be with a race being taken off the schedule. So it's really only 2 races. So I guess it'll be okay. I mean, they might be spread thin, but they're definitely outnumbering the KB guys right now.
I mean, I'm definitely going to be, one of those people that is paying attention, and I want to see what happens, because it's going to be real interesting when we get over to Seattle and throughout the rest of the season when she's out there in one of those elite powered cars, how it plays out. Because if she's still struggling the way that she was and her performance hasn't picked up and she's not going rounds and she's still not, she's bottom half for DNQ, if she's 18th to 20th in the qualifying sheets, what did you really prove, Yeah,
not a whole lot, but we'll see. I mean, they say only time will tell, and time will tell, but once again, credit to Aaron Stanfield, his victory.
For sure.
Only thing I want to touch on, though, real quick, Greg Anderson only qualified 8th, but that wasn't indicative of how great his car was running. He missed it in the best session, which I believe was the first session. Qualified 8th and had Jay Coughlin round 1. 63 to a 69. I mean, and Greg pretty much disposed of him. And then it was the matchup that everyone likes to see. It's kind of, Warren Johnson, Darrell Alderman, or Warren Johnson, Jim Yates, or Warren Johnson, insert Bob Glidden, whatever. Greg versus Erica. Erica left on him by 300s, and Greg was outperformed her by 300s and got the win. 051 on the lights to Erica's 028, 662 to Erica's 665. From that moment on, you felt like, okay, well, this is Greg Anderson's day, until, like, we spoke on it. He ran into Aaron Stansfield's 003, and it was no longer Greg Anderson's day.
No, and it's still credit to him, though, for picking up the Mission Foods Too Fast Too Tasty challenge on Saturday and having a HendrickCars.com double up with him and Brittany.
Yeah, no, and we know it's not. It wasn't the car. It was Greg, and he was okay, but he's going to definitely be a factor as this year goes on. As he's proven already, and he's going to be something to be reckoned with. It's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of this season plays out. Whether a lot of the KB guys have stepped their game up and catch up to Greg, and will Elite falter, or will they, or whatever the case may be, with them adding an extra vehicle to their stable, because I'm sure the quadras are going to come back. I mean, you're talking 9-10 deep just at Elite alone. So Pro Stock will be interesting as we start heading through the summer months and over to the U.S. Nationals.
100%.
Pro Stock Motorcycle. Last time we had the show, I predicted Matt Smith.
That's okay. We're all wrong every once in a while. It happens.
It wasn't the bike. It was Matt. I believe it was low ET in the first round with a 678. And then his wife decides to go 016 on the tree on him, which it wasn't as bad as her going 016 as Matt's light himself, where it seems like he was just saying, you know what? I'm just going to go up there, leave the starting line comfortably, and I should be able to drive around her. I don't think he expected her bike to run 680. It hadn't ran 680 all weekend. I mean,
no, I hate to say it, but I don't think that they did either. But they still raced it heads up, because don't get me wrong, they could have got down track and, Angie could have looked over and go, you know what, maybe I should just pull the clutch in, or maybe I should, short shift fifth, or I should do something to give it back the other way. And they didn't. She left on him, beat him to the finish line. That was it. They raced heads up like you'd expect them to. And that pretty much killed, I would say, everybody's pro stock motorcycle bracket. Not in the fact that they thought Matt was going to win the race, but even if you had Gage winning, you still had Matt in the finals. You know what I mean? You don't. Those are the two guys that you pick going rounds, and the fact that you got one of them out first round, I mean, that was a jaw dropper.
Outside of Q1, Matt had the quickest bike the rest of the weekend. He was even low for round one. He was low in Q2 and Q3. You know. And I mean, I had Matt Smith winning this race, and it really irked me. It irked me. It was very disappointing that not only did he lose, he lost round one.
Right.
It was just like, come on. I mean, but like you said, I don't think they expected her bike to go 680. If they did, Matt, I think, would have been much better on the tree. I think it was more so if he just didn't want to go red, she was just going to try to leave early, figured her bike would run a mid-90. I mean, like I said, it hadn't been that fast all weekend.
Close. Yeah.
Yeah. And, yeah, her bike decided to wake up at the wrong time. And the unfortunate part, or fortunate part, however you want to view it, about pro stock motorcycle racing right now is, and I spoke on this last time, we're almost back to the Schultz era, Dave Schultz. I'm drawing blanks now. John Myers. Before the Vance and Hines team really showed up about 96, 97, where if one of those bikes lose early, you pretty much just pencil in that other guy to win. And once Matt Smith had lost in round one, it was pretty much a foregone conclusion of what was going to happen the rest of the day. I mean,
but not really.
Okay, we don't race them on paper, but with Gage Herrera, you pretty much race it on paper. I mean,
honestly, I think that the biggest surprise for me, other than Matt being shown the door in the first round, was 2 pairs later, Gage is coming up there. He's got the streak on the line, right? Now, He cuts an 030 light. He goes to 680. Nobody expected Chris Bostic, of all people, the 14th and slowest bike in the field, who struggled all weekend, to put a 007 light out there, and then all of a sudden he goes to 687 out of nowhere. If Gage has a little bit worse light or that bike falters at all, it's over. It's over first round. Like, that's it. Now, obviously, round 2, no big deal, because the winner of that, because you got a 14 bike field, Gage is going to the semis, so now he's added 2 of them. Now he comes up against John Hall, which was a surprise in itself, because I did not see Chase Van. I would have penciled Chase Van Zandt into the semis against Gage, but you put John Hall in his place because Chase, 2000s red, it happens. Gage has an 084 light against John, and that was a beatable run. Yes, he went 676, but a 681. I mean, we got a 500s window in there. If John Hall is 30 or better on the tree, Gage is out. That's it. Then you go to the finals against his teammate. They cut identical lights. Gage has got the bike aimed wrong or whatever's going on. He's just listing towards the center line the whole way down the track. Richard was actually better in the first 60 foot up to 330. And then Gage kind of just come around him at the other end by, about 300 or so, a mile an hour faster. But, Richard has a little better light. Gage gets a little more out of the groove and has to close the throttle because that thing's heading toward the blocks. That's probably the most out of shape or out of the groove or crooked run that I've seen him make in the 2 years, almost 2 years of professional racing that he's done. So he was beatable all 3 rounds. He lost to Matt Smith in the Mission Foods Challenge in Q2, and he turned on the red light by 8,000ths in Q3 in the last round of qualifying. So Gage he's almost leaving the door open, but nobody's walking through it.
Well, Chris Bostic tried.
He did.
Tries he may. He failed. He had the buy in round 2 like we spoke on.
Right.
John Hall, if you're 020 on the tree, it's a different story. Yeah.
It's over.
Once again, and then Richard Gaston, I mean, they were 0-22. Richard couldn't do much better than that. I mean, even if he was perfect on the line, he wouldn't have won.
He wouldn't have, but it could have made it closer. And like I say, Gage with the way that motorcycle was veering, it almost looked like the way that bike handled when Angel was on it. You know, she had a problem as it got down track. That thing started going left or right out of the groove, and their opportunities were there, which is what makes the fact that he's been able to put 39 win lights in a row together and 10 national event wins in a row together that nobody else has, that much more impressive, because there are plenty of times that the streak could have been stopped. I mean, how many times have they gone up there and the bike not started versus how many times have Matt and Angie gone up there and shut off after the burnout or the bike didn't start and they didn't get to make the run? You know what I mean? The team just doesn't have the problems that other teams have, and they are beatable, as Matt Smith has shown the past couple of weeks and in qualifying. Gage is beatable. He is human. But when it comes down to race day eliminations, I'm curious to see how far this goes. 45, 47. At this point, I'm almost hoping he sweeps the whole season.
No, he's
I
done
hope
in
he doesn't
Norwalk.
win.
He's done in Norwalk.
He may be, but he may not be. We may be getting the Indy going. All right, can he sweep the countdown too? He swept the regular season. When does it end? You know, and yes, the law of averages will catch up to you eventually. It always does. But when will it? Because he's in uncharted territory. Nobody has ever done this before. The greatest in the sports history in any of the categories has not done what he is doing right now.
Okay. But for a vast majority of that time, he had the best bike.
But he's still doing it. Glidden had the best car. So did
I get you.
Schumacher, you know.
I get it. Right now, he doesn't have the best bike. He might be a better bike rider combination.
Right.
Because lo and behold, that streak could have ended in Bristol, but he beat Matt on the whole shot.
Correct.
If Angie's bike does what it was supposed to do, and that's run a 7 flat, more than likely Matt makes his way to the final. I mean, nothing's guaranteed in this sport, but he doesn't have the best bike. And I stood on it for Richmond. I'm going to stand on it again. It ends in Norwalk. It's over. It's over. I don't know. It's over in Norwalk. That's all I can say. Credit to that team and what they've done. You can't take anything away from them. It's not like they're doing something that they're getting away with something that no one else can do or anything to that magnitude. I mean, they're just good right now. It's almost like this big corporate team versus these bunch of little independent teams is how it looks. That's really how it looks. And to an extent, that's really what it is. It's a big corporate powerhouse beating up on a bunch of little independent teams.
What do they got that nobody else does?
Well, they build their own motors for one, and some of the Suzuki guys have to purchase motors from them. And let's just say you're not going to get the A motor, I wouldn't think. I mean, let's just be honest here. I mean, what do they have that everyone else has? Mostly money and resources. I mean, they got a shop over there in Brownsburg right next to Schumacher's, and they got 2 buildings. I mean, it's like,
yeah, but I think pound for pound, I think when you say it that way, that's like, I think Matt Smith would object to that. I don't think that Matt Smith, there's nothing that Vance and Hines can do that Matt can't do himself.
To a certain extent, but there's a reason Matt went back to a Buell and got off the Suzuki. And Matt has told that story. You probably have seen it. I believe It's a Facebook page called Cycle Drag or something of that nature. You know, there were certain parts and pieces that Matt was not able to get or was not getting at the timely manner that he needed it from the Vance and Himes team or Suzuki. And, you know, it kind of forced him back on the Buell, which to me was the best decision he ever made, just in my mind. I mean, he made one great run on that Suzuki, which was the Friday night session at Sonoma last year. I believe it was 103 or 104 on 60 foot. It was his best 60 foot time of the year. I believe the bike went 672 or maybe 671. He tied Gage Herrera, I believe, for the number one spot in Sonoma last year. That was the best running man on Suzuki all year. Meanwhile, Gage was living in the 60s at most of the events, especially once it got colder. It was like,
well, and so consider the fact that in the course of this streak, Gage has had weight added to his specific combination and penalized everybody else that ran it too because of that. They've changed the spec fuel that you can run because they thought, well, you know, maybe it's the fuel. Maybe that they're running something that nobody else has. You know, he's had these things thrown at them specifically. They've given concessions of weight to the other teams, and yet the streak continues.
yeah, so, I get that.
You know, I mean, like it's like, all right, how much more parity do you want, and how much more closer can you make these bikes to run each other? And you don't want it to be like the IROC series, like I always talk about with NASCAR, where it's just everybody's equal and it's the rider and the driver makes the difference.
Yeah.
You want them to have input, but you also want the team, the car, the preparation, and the ingenuity to matter too. So,
correct.
I mean, I feel like that for the last couple events, Gage has been beatable, and he has been beaten on Saturday. And just when it comes down to it, he's still turning them on. So,
yeah, the streak ends in Norwalk. I know I said that about Richmond. Matt was blindsided by Angie, and it happens. The streak ends in Norwalk.
Well, I mean, if you say that about every race going forward, you're bound to be right sooner or later.
You know, I would actually skip Norwalk and say the streak ends in Denver, but there's no Denver this year.
All right, so
because that's where the Suzuki's had a disadvantage, and the Buells actually outperformed them in Denver. So if I really had to put a stake in the ground and pick a track, it would have been Denver. I'd have said the streak ends in Denver. Where is it going to end? Honestly, what do I believe is going to end next? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm saying Norwalk because I'm ready for it to end and I'm tired of it. I mean, it's great what he's doing, but I'm still sick of it. It's almost like just enter Gage's name and insert whoever here next to it, and that's going to be the end result. I don't know. He doesn't sweep the season, though. That doesn't happen. But
well, I mean, no. By the law of averages, I would not think that it would. But who also thought that Steve Torrence was going to sweep the countdown and win 6 races in a row in top fuel either? So,
difference is
wherever it happens to end, it's going to end, and it's going to be. It's still just it goes down in history as the greatest win streak in NHRA history in any category and class. I mean, you'll never take that away from him. And at this point, it's one of those things where me as a fan of the storyline per se, I looked at like when Jimmy Johnson won 5 championships in a row in NASCAR. It was unprecedented. Nobody ever won 3 in a row. Then he tied it. Then he won 4. Then he won 5. And everybody's like, man, when is this going to end? But I'm like, you know what? You're witnessing history. It's going to be 5 years before anybody can even match that if they're able to again. just like when he won his 7th championship. It's like, okay, the next guy's got, the most is 2. It's going to be 5 years before anybody, even if they win out, is going to come close to that. So the fact that these records are piling up now, I mean, it took 45 years for Bob Glidden's record to be beat. 45 years. And if this streak ends at 10, 11, 12, wherever it ends at, how much longer is it going to be before anybody in any class comes close to breaking it? Will it ever be broke? You know what I mean? So
I got you.
Once you're already this far into it, I just want to see how far it goes.
I get it. I get that aspect of it. Yeah, I guess that would be interesting to see how far can you take it. The Jimmy Johnson,
you ain't going to restart it. He ain't going to lose at Norwalk and then win another 10 in a row from Seattle all the way through to, it just doesn't happen that way.
It's not going to happen again.
No.
I get it. In a way, it's kind of sit back and enjoy it, and let's see how far this goes.
Exactly. And let everybody come up there and take their shot, because whoever is in the other lane and turns on that win light is going to be a hero. They're going to get a parade up to the starting line. All the other motorcycle teams are going to be out there parading them back. Whoever it is, it don't matter. They're all going to be like, finally, we beat them.
As great as this year has been for Gage, and let's say he wins the next 3 races in a row. What if he doesn't win the championship?
Yeah, could you imagine that?
That would be at all times that would be worse, way worse than Justin Ashley last year.
Well, but you had other teams and drivers. Caps had a really good season. He put down a lot of wins. Height had a season where he put down a lot of wins, and Caps won the championship. So not like this, but you're almost basing it off of 2 different things, because anymore, and I hate to look at it this way, but there's no other way to look at it. The championship doesn't mean anything anymore when it comes to looking at the whole season. Your championship is how good you can be over 6 races.
Correct.
That's it. That is all a championship means anymore. You do not have a full season worth of points that matters. Your consistency doesn't matter. You just got to be good for 6 races, and you're the champ. They call you the best of the best.
Correct. So if Gage Herrera sweeps the regular season, and let's say he wins 3 countdown races, whatever the case may be, and doesn't win the championship.
Yes.
Is that like an all-time just blunder, just muff? Like,
well, it exposes the system for what it is. I mean, Steve Torrance had a great 2017, and Brittany walked away with the championship, and you heard what Torrance had to say about it. So it exposes it for what it is, and it just goes to show that your championship mindset is not what it used to be, and you just have to adjust for it. Everybody knows that going in. It's no different than in NASCAR, where you could go out there and get lucky and win the Daytona 500, get yourself into the playoffs, and then you suck the whole rest of the year. You run 30th every race, but you walk into a win at the Daytona 500 because the field crashed. So you got your place. Now comes September, when they're all right, everybody restarts the playoff. Here we go. And you start advancing rounds just because you're stroking it and you're running top 10 and other guys are falling out. Like, same thing. You can have an absolute garbage season and win, or you could go out there just like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, all these guys, they go out there and they put down 7-8 wins in a season. They build up all of those bonus points. They have 2 bad races and they're out. Yeah. And that sucks. I mean, but it's just what it is. Well, you can look at how many teams in the NFL win out the whole regular season and then lose the Super Bowl.
Yeah, so, my Niners.
Right. It happens. Does it mean that, is it a big blunder on their part? Or did somebody else just step up when it counted?
No, you're right. You're right. And yeah, it's a blunder on their part. If it's that Gage Herrera team, it's a blunder on their part.
Yeah, I don't think you lose. But it depends on how they lose. Did they lose because NHRA is like, all right, put another 20 pounds on them?
Well,
and then
that's
take
different.
It away? You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. You can. There's ways that it can be taken away too. But so the Vance and Hines team, I think, leaves a lot of bad taste in people's mouths because of their Harley Davidson days and how the Harleys basically, sometimes they would kind of stroke through the season. Then when it gets to the countdown, Eddie and Andrew win every race. And it's like, where was that all year long? Well, it don't matter all year long. It only matters for the last 6. So
they were called sandbaggers. They were
exactly, because they didn't want to get weight put on them. They didn't want to get penalized. They know, okay, we'll give up a couple wins here to just crush them in the countdown.
That's crazy. This might be what they're doing. Well, they're not giving up anything right now.
No, they're not giving up anything now. They're out there they're probably the same mentality. You know what? We've made it this far. How far can we make it before
it's amazing.
Something happens?
It's amazing when they had the Harley program. They were building a lot of the engines for the Suzukis, and it's amazing how those Suzuki bikes didn't quite run as well as they're running now that they're no longer with the Harley program, and all of a sudden the Suzukis are all of a sudden running a lot better. Makes you wonder.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where, the old wise man, I taught you everything you know, but I didn't teach you everything I know. Yeah. So they got some speed secrets. They've been in this team a long time. I mean, Terry Vance, Byron Hines, you go back to some of these things. I mean, it's not like they're new to this. They have been out there. They have perfected their game. They have evolved with the class. And, they had their struggles, their lean years. They finally came back together. And like you said, 96, 97, when Matt came out there and got on that bike, instant contenders.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Norwalk is soon to come. I believe it's next weekend.
It is. So we got 5 days. 5 days. We're going to see them already having their Mission Foods rematches here on Saturday. It's going to be interesting.
I look forward to talking about it. We'll see. We'll see if the streak continues for Gage. We'll see if John Force returns, and we'll see if Team Kalitta can continue their dominance. Until then, hey, folks, it's been fun. Thanks for tuning in. Or if you tune in later, thanks for watching. Until next time, me and Dave W. We'll catch up with you guys later. Have a good night.